You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday, April 23rd, 2023 at around 3 p.m. And we are continuing our playthrough of The Case of the Blinded Birder from MurdersByMail.com. Let's do a little bookkeeping, check in with the chat, and then we'll open today's letter. Okay, just a little bit of bookkeeping. Last week we played the third game in the Cryptic Killers series called Murder of a Musician. Quite good. Some really satisfying aha moments and some good evidence. Maybe not our favorite Cryptic Killers, but a very solid series. And I think now that we've played 3 of them, I'll try to post a spoiler-free review of them soon. What else should we say? If you're interested in helping choose what games we play next, go to the Board Game Geek Guild section forum for this channel, which you'll find a link to on the About page, and help us decide what games to play next. We're sort of wide open on what to play. You can see behind me, there's actually a new game just arrived called Be the Detective. This is another cold case game by a company I know nothing about. But this is a good opportunity to remind you that I purchase all the games here myself, so I have purchased that game. One of the advantages of that is we don't feel any compulsion to say positive things about a game. If we don't like it, we can be honest about it. But that's also a good opportunity for me to thank one of the viewers, Ginny, who sent me a gift certificate for Amazon. And if you know the history of this channel, when Greg and I started it a couple of years ago, we started out right from the front saying, please support us on Patreon. And that turned out to be a mistake. I was advised not to do that, not to start asking for money right up front. But I thought, well, if we're going to try to make a go of this channel and be funded through Patreon, which I think is the ideal way for people creating this kind of content to be funded. I think it's has a corrupting effect when board game channels get free games and get paid to do Kickstarter previews. It's not ideal. Whereas direct funding from viewers is the way to go, and it feels like much more healthy relationship to be funded by the people who are appreciating the content. Anyway, if you know the history of this channel, Greg and I had our ups and downs, and at some point it became clear that this was not going to be, it never did start out as a commercial enterprise, but at some point I realized, okay, there's no point going through the hassle of asking people to fund the channel when really you were just talking about a handful of people that were willing to do so, and it didn't feel right asking for money. So I'm not asking for any money, but point is that I gladly accept that. I appreciate it, and it will go towards the fund of buying games. And maybe at some point, if the cost of buying games becomes too much for me to bear, I will start asking people to help contribute to purchasing games. Right now, we don't need that. That's fine. You're fine. You can keep your money. Okay, what else bookkeeping-wise? After this stream at 4 p.m., we will be playing Dear Holmes. I have the next letter from Dear Holmes. That actually has turned out to be a very pleasant start to a new series, since we're almost done with The Blinded Birder, and when we finish The Blinded Birder, Dear Holmes will take over our Sunday afternoons for the foreseeable future. Whether that will always be at 3 p.m. Central Time or whether we might move it an hour up or whatever, I don't know. Right now we're doing both games back to back, but we'll be soon done with Blinded Birder and focus on Dear Holmes. All right, what else do we need to talk about before we jump into this? The main thing we're going to have to decide today or soon is when to solve this case. We've known the solution for a while. I think last week we opened the questions, and in fact, we'll look at those in a second. We can answer those questions now, but there are still some things we could pursue. Once we answer it, we can't visit anywhere else in this game. And it's a sad moment. It's bittersweet to come to the end. We've been playing this now for 4 months together, 16, 17 turns. And this has been a very enjoyable town to visit. And we've been working with these 3 investigators in this story, and I'm sad to see them go. And I'm sort of reluctant. Part of me wants to never solve it. We could just spend another couple months just hanging out here. And that's a viable option for us. But the audience is going to decide that. The audience will vote and decide when to solve it, when to move on. Anything else in the chat that anyone wants to talk about? Projects they've been working on? While you're thinking about that, let's look at the questions from last week. If you plan to play this game yourself, you should stop watching now. We're going to look at now the end questions, which are in a secret envelope, which we opened last week. Here they are here. Maybe the best thing for me to do is use my cubes here. Okay, so here are the questions. 3 primary questions. Who killed Rupert Albright? What was the killer's motive? And what location should the police visit to catch the killer? Now, we know the answer to the first 2. We're with very high confidence. Number 3 has given us a little bit of a conundrum in terms of interpreting what the game wants from us. Is it really just asking us? I mean, the first question asks us who did it. So the third question feels a little redundant. Is it asking us to go where the killer most likely is? Is it asking us to go where we think the best evidence is to catch the person? Is it suggesting that the killer is on the run and that we should know some information about where they would go to hide out? Secondary question. I'm going to catch up. I'm going to answer something in the chat you've reminded me to talk about in a second. Let's just finish up these secondary questions. What was Juliet keeping from her husband? Roberto Canagar is in the channel. He's the one who helped us figure out where to go to learn this information. It was Rupert Albright's past job in the carpet store. We actually visited her last turn and found out the answer to this, which we suspected we might catch her having killed her husband, but it turns out she was just having an affair and spilled some wine, so we know that answer. What was the source of the ghost stories? Well, we knew that early on. That was Kathleen Carwood planting fake archaeological items and spotted by some dog walkers on the hill. She looked like a ghost. What new hobby had Rupert Albright taken up? We know he'd recently been listening to bats. How did Alice Albright die? He's a widow and the wife died, and we recently tracked that down as a little side case of our own. We decided to figure it out. And we think we know that he wasn't involved in her death. We wondered if he didn't murder her, but he had no good motive for that. She didn't have money for him to inherit. And we learned he was kind of a bastard, but he didn't kill her. We talked to her doctor. She seemed to have asthma all her life, and she died of tuberculosis. But we did spend, one of the places we went at the end of the last turn was to her hospital after talking to her doctor, and we're going to really nail that down. We suspect her family might blame him, but we think the hospital is going to confirm she died in hospital. It's going to confirm that it was tuberculosis and that he had nothing to do with it. So, and I didn't say, but we know the killer is Kathleen Carwood, the director of the dig, who he was blackmailing. We know she was a good shot. We know that a blonde, tall woman was seen driving away from the scene of the crime, and she was the one who was the good shot. We found the note where they were going to meet at this place in Heller's Hole, so it's pretty cut and dry that she was the killer and that she was alone there and did the killing. Killer's motive, we know, is to get out from the blackmail. The real question here we're not sure about how to answer is, where do we go to kill her? And I want the chat's opinion about this. We know where she spends almost all her time. That's at the dig. We know she barely spends any time at her house. And we had another little piece of evidence to suggest that the answer to that is the dig, which is when we talked to Janet Rosso, her fellow researcher, we got sort of confirmation that Janet Rosso is not one of the shooters, but is very protective of Kathleen. They were best friends since growing up. Maybe they're a little closer than best friends now. But as we're finishing up our conversation with Janet Rosso, and we ask her about the shooting and everything, she wants to rush off to the dig. That suggests that she's going to meet Kathleen. So I think probably that's another hint that the place we want to go is the dig. The only part that's giving me some doubt there is that we found her gun in her house. So it's sort of tempting to want to send the police to her house to get that evidence, which would prove definitively, once they check the ballistics, that that was the murder weapon. So you could argue that the best place to go to get evidence to catch the killer would be her house. And then the other question is whether she's on the run. The only thing that gives us a little bit pause there is we know there's 3 women involved in this case. And we found 2 of them, but the third one, which is in their original photo and is still in the picture because the 3 of them go to this talk where they protest. We have never caught wind of who that third person is, that third woman is. Chat channel says, is it me or something went wild? Okay, I didn't notice anything happen on the stream. I can see on my stats, everything looks good. So let me know if anyone else noticed anything weird on the channel. Looks like everyone lost connection for a bit. Hopefully not too much. I was just recapping. Okay. Okay, everyone lost connection. Okay, so, well, anyway, I just reviewed our answers to the questions. Hopefully I didn't lose too much. Maybe you have everyone had a little bit of problem with the stream, but it's back. Okay, you've made me make a note. Maybe I need to. I have one of the plugins I wrote alerts me pretty boldly when I lose connection, but if it resumes and I didn't notice it, it doesn't keep track. So maybe I'll do that. And you guys know how to catch my attention in the chat if something goes wrong. Okay, anyway. So Emmy says, I'd like to find the third woman before we answer the questions. If the killer's on the run, I reckon that's someone who'd help her hide out. Well, that's what I was talking about, the third woman. And I was confirming, if you missed it, that we did get word that the third woman is still in the picture because she showed up at the talk at the gentleman's club. There were 3 women there. We've never heard her name. We've never seen her mentioned other than in the original photo. But we were told that there were 3 women who showed up at the club. So there's that. Okay. So I made a note of the other sort of unanswered questions that we could conceivably try to figure out. The one that's, so I did make a note about the 3 women and the letter that mentions there were 3 women that showed up at the gentleman's club. In the same letter, letter number 9, about halfway through our playthrough, we also have this other weird mystery for us, which is the death of Went. We stumbled on his scene, his death. We stumbled on a person who mentioned the police were up at the death when it was clear the game hadn't intended us to find out about that through that way. Like, the game had intended us to hear about his death somewhere else, and we have yet to find that. We sort of broke the game. We had a little bug in the game. The creator of the game has told us they've since fixed that and added a new little node of the story for people who find it the way we did. But surprisingly, we haven't stumbled on the official way we're supposed to hear about his death, which is very strange. So I've been hoping we would stumble onto that at some point. We haven't yet. There are some possible ways we might do that. But one way that seemed like, okay, it seems like people are reporting they're having trouble with the stream. But I don't know what I can do about that. It seems like it's sending to YouTube fine. So maybe when you guys back up on YouTube, it'll still be there. Well, I'm just talking anyway, so let me just keep going. One of the strangest things with Went, in addition to not stumbling upon the official way the game is telling us about his death, is that we got this scene where we're told the brother came to the house. And maybe it's worth looking at that. That happens in letter 9. Both that and the 3 women are both mentioned in letter 9. So let me just show you this for a second here. So here is the mention of the 3 women. They're having the talk. 3 women charged in, demanding to be allowed to stay and express support for Houndscliff. We're told one of them is Kathleen Carwood. The other one is Rosso, Janet Rosso. She is the one who has the gun, although we know that's a false lead because she's not good at using the gun. But 3 women did show up, and there were 3 women in their original photos. So that 3rd woman is still lurking about. So there's that. And then the other thing here is Went's brother. So we go to Went's house. We're trying to find him. He's missing. We haven't yet stumbled on his body, but listen to what this person says. A couple of days ago, I saw Went's dog running about in the field. Okay, channel is telling me to check the chat. Okay, so people are having trouble with the connection. Nicholas says, for me, it's not losing connection, just pausing. Stops streaming and just spins. Debbie says, problem must be on Jesse's end. Lost connection. All right, well, this is a weird thing. Usually when we have a connection trouble, I see it here. So I'm going to assume that YouTube is receiving everything. I'm just going to keep going. And I have this recorded locally, so worst comes to worst, I can upload a new version which has everything I'm saying. But hopefully it's just temporary connection trouble on your end, on YouTube's sharing of the stream. And you're not missing anything important yet. So I will just continue. Anyway, we go to his house, and we're told that this person saw Went's dog. Went loves the dog, this person says. He would never leave the creature out in the woods alone. And then she ran into a man claiming to be Went's brother. He was searching for the dog. He caught my eye. He was searching for his brother, but was trying to catch the dog to make sure it was looked after until he had found his brother. Did you speak with his brother? I asked. Yes, he said he was worried, asked if I'd seen his brother. I told him last time I saw him was the evening before, just at dusk, and then he tells us the story, which we know is Kathleen Carwood picking him up in his car and killing him, dropping him in the ditch. But at the time, we said, okay, well, we don't know if this is really his brother or someone else looking for him. Now it seems like that probably was his brother, probably was looking for him and his dog. But we've never run into this person again, and we don't know how to find his brother. So I wonder if this isn't the way to find out about Went's death, through his brother, if we could find his brother, but I don't know how to find his brother. It's not in the directory. There's only one entry in the directory for Went. That's Went's house. We've already been there. So I did have one possible theory. If the brother is trying to catch the dog because the dog has been abandoned once Went was kidnapped and killed, I did have a thought that we could conceivably go to the vet. Maybe he caught the dog and brought it to the vet. That's a real long shot, but it's a possibility if we really wanted to find it. Now, we already know what happened to Went. We know he was killed. But it might be nice to solve the mystery of how you find out about Went. Another possibility for finding out about Went would be going to the local police station, which someone else wanted to go to last week. Anyway, that's where we are. Those are the two main things we could visit. There was some concern, I'm just spending a little time recapping here. There was some concern about the mystery of why the inspector was so hot on blaming the poachers. And I think we had a little bit of a debate here about, could the inspector sort of be trying to cover up for Kathleen Carwood? But I want to remind you, I thought about that a little bit. I reread our discussion when we went to talk to his wife. So let's think about this for a second. He's married, so it's probably not that he has a love affair with Kathleen Carwood and is covering up for her. We found no sign that the two of them are somehow involved in anything. And when we talk to his wife, she gives us her explanation. She tells us that, well, he was trying to rush through to get for a press conference, and he realized at some point that it probably wasn't the poachers, but he's embarrassed to admit he was wrong at the press conference. And then she actually goes further. Let's see, I made a note. This was in letter 8. She actually goes further than that. This, I think, seals the deal that the inspector is not in on it. She says, that, here, she says, well, the alibi of the poacher was solid. He wasn't in the area. Eventually, she says, he'll own up to his mistake. He's not an ass, just embarrassed. He's still working hard on the case, but he could use some help. But then she says this. He actually told me yesterday, she's talking about the inspector, that he found evidence Albright had been blackmailing someone, but he hasn't found out who. He could use some help. Okay, so Inspector is actually trying to solve the case. He is on the job. He has actually found out about the blackmail, so he's not trying to cover up for Kathleen. So I think that puts that to rest. All right. Everyone is saying they're having a little bit of trouble in Europe, but we're going to keep going now. Let us read our new answers here. Long overdue. And actually, we have to be done with this by 4 for our Dear Homes thing, so I probably shouldn't have been spending so much time recapping, but we're trying to get the most out of this game because we don't want to leave this world. I don't want to leave this world prematurely. All right, so let us get our last letter here. All right, where did we send everyone? We sent Imogen to Constable Harlan's house. Well, Constable Harlan was mentioned right in the beginning as one of the people that went with the inspector to discover the body. And for some reason, like we heard about him in the intro letter, we overlooked him. Someone in the channel pointed that out. I forget who it was. So we decided to go to him. We sent Cecily to the newspaper. That was one of our informants. That's another way we might learn about Wendt, I'm hoping. And then we sent the vicar, where he couldn't get into too much trouble, to the hospital to sort of completely nail down the wife's death. So we sent him to the hospital where we know the wife, Rupert Albright's wife, died. So here we go. Cecily going to her informant at the newspaper. Let's see what she says. Dear Jesse, I drove the Wait, that's Imogen. Where's Cecily? Okay, sorry. Here's Cecily. She went to the newspaper. Dearest Jesse, Graham Hushly. Oh boy, this is hard to read her handwriting. Graham welcomed me into his newspaper office with a firm handshake and an offer of tea. A handsome man in his 40s, he has an easy way with both men and women, which encourages people to open up to him. It's a skill I admire, and I make an informal study of his technique whenever we meet. One pattern I've noticed that works rather well is his quickness with compliments. Remember that this gang of people are all like mystery readers, so she's fashioned herself as a detective. She's learning these skills here. Have you been exercising, Miss Cecily? You look fantastic. Certainly works on me. Oh, very kind of you to notice, I said. I have been walking a lot recently. He poured my tea. Oh, that must be it. What's got you rambling so much? Well, a little investigation. It involves heading all over the valley asking questions. I told him about our work with Albright. He listened, then whistled low. Interesting story for sure. Smacks of foul play, doesn't it? I took a dainty bite of cucumber sandwich. Delightful. In your newspaper, have you uncovered anything exciting about the case? I asked. He leaned over his tea setting. He was married, you know, his wife Alice. I don't know why. I must have changed the layout here. I don't know why it's hiding behind the camera for me here. His wife Alice died during the war. At the hospital, I hear, and left poor hubby some money. A lot of money, I asked. Don't know. Her maiden name was Crawford. Rumor is the Crawfords are prosperous farmers. Rumor is she's got some cash. She got some cash when her old man passed, and that after she followed him into the great beyond, her brother was against Rupert getting a penny of it. I decided give the flattery technique a whirl. So, if I were an expert investigator like yourself, where might I go to find out some more? All right. Well, Alice, Albright's lawyer, could tell you more about the inheritance. Can't be too hard to track that down. There aren't many firms around here, and the hospital could probably tell you more about her death. He offered me another little sandwich, which I accepted. She must have been pretty young when she died. If I were you, I'd want to make sure it was of, natural causes. Do you think Albright might have murdered his own wife for money? He winked at me. Not sure, but if it were true, it would sure make a hell of a story. All right, well, we've already pretty much ruled out that. He says go talk to the lawyer and her hospital, and we actually are going to the hospital in this letter. So that's that. This is not relevant for us. We've already solved that. All right. Here's Cecily going to Constable Harlan. Again, this is an early place we could have gone early, so probably not going to be new stuff for us. Dear Jessie, I drove the Jaguar over to the nearby village of Lickenford. Wooster loves a good fast drive through the winding roads around Bockerley. We rolled down the windows and enjoyed the sensation. I found Harlan's address with little difficulty. Hello there, Mum, he said, leaning from his door. I waved back, decided to leave Wooster in the car, then approached him with a smile and outreached hand. Hesitating, he shook it as one would a man's. In such moments of class awkwardness, I find it best to get to the point. Constable Harlan, you were present at the crime scene surrounding our poor Mr. Albright. Is that correct? Yeah. Would you like to... He gestured into the modest house. Oh, thank you. Sounds like it's suggesting to us that Imogen was not the right upper crust person to visit this constable. No, thank you. Could you describe to me the body? Constable Harlan glanced at me and shrugged. I don't think I'm supposed to. Could you please describe to me the body? She says. He looked over at my shining automobile and back at me, and his natural inclination to cooperate came to the fore. Well, Mum, the body was fresh-like. Coroner Pye guessed he'd only been dead 10-12 hours before we arrived. No smell, really, not even that much blood. I would think there would be a great deal of blood for someone who was shot in the eye. Well, you see, he licked his lips nervously. Well, the bullet went through the eye socket and into his skull, you follow? No exit wound in the back of his head, so the bullet bounced around in there, ended him quick-like. Died in a snap, says Pye. His heart stopped pumping straight away, and we found him face up he didn't leak much. He made brief eye contact and winced. Sorry, Mum, didn't mean to be so plain. Oh, that's quite all right, I said. On his back, you say? Aye, in a bunch of weeds by a log, just lying there, one eye staring up to the sky. Broken field glasses on his chest, his hands still holding on to them. He looked pained. Way he was lying, I figure he must have been gazing into the woods when the bullet came whizzing out. He fell straight back like a tree, feet pointed north and west. Do you agree with Swift's theory about it being a random accident? He gave me a look that made it clear he didn't, but he chose not to verbalize this. Instead, he said, well, Swift's the inspector, and it's his job to decide all that, not mine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'd better not say any more. Okay, well, just confirms everything we knew. A little extra flavor about the crime scene. Nothing new. Okay, here's the victor at the hospital. Let's see if we can wrap up the death of his wife once and for sure. He's titled this report, Clocks and Nurses. Anyone living in our country knows the Middleshire Hospital well. I'm fortunate I haven't required many stays there, though many friends and family have. I knew exactly where to go to ask about the Albrights, the lead nurse, Jolene Reshing. "Vicar," she barked as I approached her station. "Give me 4 minutes, love." She always calls me love. Cecily suggests that this is because she's interested in me. When I point that out, when I point out that I'm not the only male Nurse Reshing, the only male that Nurse Reshing uses this diminutive with, Cecily laughs and says she's sticking to her guns. I contemplated this as Nurse Reshing hurried an elderly man into an exam room, stormed her way down a clipboard checklist, and checked in a mother and her infant. Through each interaction, her meaty hands were a blur, her smile professional and genuine, and almost exactly 4 minutes her attention returned to me. "I'll try not to waste your time," I said. "Oh, that's good," she said, with an even wider smile, "as I haven't much." "Thank you," I said, then relayed the basics of our investigation as clearly as I could. My eyes had grown accustomed to glancing at the clock second hand, and I was pleased that my query came in under 60 seconds. "Albright," said Nurse Reshing. "Yeah, I remember him. His wife died on my ward, over a decade ago. A terrible shame. She was tiny, sweet, and quiet. Dandelion Foss, as my Aunt G used to say, far too young to pass from this world." "May I ask what she died of?" Nurse Reshing raised one substantial eyebrow. She was better connected in Berkeley as I, and no doubt she knew more about my inquiries than my brief summation had provided. "Well, she wasn't murdered, if that's what you're after. There were rumors at the time that her husband was an abusive sort. Yeah, I witnessed some terrible bruises on her back. She gave me the usual excuse, and her brother, Ted Crawford, who barely left her side while she was here, I'll tell you, he was convinced that Rupert Albright had caused them. In any case, it was a cough that brought her to the ward and a cough that took her away. She died of tuberculosis, Vicar." "And how did Rupert react when she passed?" I asked. "I couldn't tell you. He wasn't here when it happened." "How sad," I said. Nurse Reshing rolled her eyes. "Well, Rupert struck me as less than a loving man, but Alice's family loved her dearly. They were here with her the entire time, and I distinctly remember how angry Ted Crawford seemed. Something about an inheritance, if I recall, but I never learned the details." At that, she glanced at her watch. "Well, you've been a perfect help," I said. "I'll let you return to your patients." Okay, so very strong confirmation she died of her tuberculosis, which is what the game wanted us to explain. We haven't talked to the brother of the farmer. He's just going to blame Rupert because they don't like him, but we know he didn't do it. Okay, so nothing new as expected. So we've got a choice now. We could try to answer the questions. The only one we're not 100% sure how to answer is where should the police go to catch her? Or we could pick 3 more places to go. If we were going to pick 3 more places, where is our list of places? All right, we haven't been to the Historical Society. We haven't been to Library Stacks. Those are 2 informant places we could go. No particular reason we think that would be useful. We could go to the vet to see if we can find Went's dog. That seems like a real long shot. We could go to the Jolly Run transportation place to see if we can find out more details about the side story about the birds that the game has not asked us about and clearly doesn't care if we figure out, so there's not much reason to do that. If we wanted to find the third woman, I'm not sure how we would even go about doing that. We have no good leads about how to find her. What does the chat think? Let's have a vote about whether you guys want to solve it now. The only problem is we only have 20 minutes left before our dear homes. I probably should have budgeted more time for us, but I went a little long. Let's see. Debbie says, get rid of, I guess I got to get rid of the vote thing, although it's still open. You can still solve it. Okay. Debbie says, I think it's time to solve this, to be honest. We know the answers. We're just getting the same leads over and over again. From an in-universe point of view, we would want to get Kathleen arrested. Yeah. Professor Cedric Durante could tell the incident at the men's club from a different perspective. Interesting. Anyone have any idea for finding the third woman? I think that would be the last thing I'm interested in. I find it very strange that if there's a way to find her, we haven't heard any other clues about her. So the only thing I thought about was Kathleen's, the university they work at. Like, we went to the dig. Does she have a home university? The directory lists no university, but it does list a private college. Is this Kathleen's college? It's off the map, but we've got a records office, a faculty residence. Like, is that where Kathleen works? I'm not sure we got any real mention of where she works. But theoretically, we would go there and find out about the third woman, but I don't know why we wouldn't hear about her working at the dig. The biggest mystery we could go to the drugstore. Remember, we have the side story about the drugstore in the newspaper getting their show disrupted by the airplanes. Rob says, I too think we should solve it. We're just getting differently worded confirmations about what we already know. I think I agree with everyone. But I think I agree that there's no more to see here. But I'm going to make a Portney School is where Robert Cole meets. Portney School for College. Okay, that's a actually, that is the same numbers. Portney School is where Robert Cole Werther's, the buyer at the auction, works. So we don't think that's where Kathleen Carwood works, huh? All right, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I know this is surely frustrating, but we only have 15 minutes before the scheduled Dear Homes stream. And because I'm getting together with Greg later, I have to keep to a schedule. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to solve it today. So we're going to go one more week, and then we're going to solve it next week for sure. That way I'll schedule it. I can post it. It'll be the final episode, and we can go into it with enough time to talk about the ending and read the ending rather than rush through it now. So we're going to take one more turn, and we're going to quickly decide on places to go. And we're never coming back here. We don't have another game from this company. Let's make sure we don't rush it, and we should string it out till we're sick of it. Okay, so we're going to pick 3 places. So here's where I think we should go. I think we should go to the Jolly Run Transportation to find out extra little information about these 3 birds that we found in the newspaper. The question's not asking us about it, but I want to know. And it's kind of fun to go to this last piece of the puzzle at Jolly Run. So E16 was Jolly Run. So I'm going to send the vicar to E16 and have him find out. Remember, they're the people who had the shipping box that the birds were found in. We think they fell off a truck while they were moving him. So we're going to send the vicar there. And then I think maybe let's continue along this theme. Let's send Cecily to George Sable drugstore, where he claims that the radio interference interrupted him, because the military base says, nope, that wasn't us. And I think it would be nice to solve that mystery. And then Emmy says, how about the last place where the 3rd woman could go? The Historical Society or the college they worked for? Okay, well, I don't know what college they worked for, but we can go either to the Historical Society or the library stacks. Which is more likely to be our 3rd woman's location? The library stacks could have articles about her, but probably would be more like general reference. So I think the Historical Society. So how about we go there, B18. And maybe we send Imogen there. Or Cedric Durante, who is the other person who disagreed with them. All right. I think we should pick these 3. I'm open to a different place. I mean, I know that the 3rd woman, I don't think we're going to be able to find her. But if someone would prefer to go to the college, it's just I don't know if she's in that college. That's the problem. If we had the name of her college, I would happily go to her college. I don't think we know it. John at Rosso's house. All right, let's do these 3. It's our last visit to Bakali. On the next episode, we will solve it. All right, here we go. So Cecily is going to N57, which is the Sable drugstore. She's going to try to suss out if that guy was drunk when he said his radio show got interfered with. Imogen is going to the Historical Society, which is B18, one of our informants. And the vicar is going to E16 Jolly Run to see if he can track down whether they can confirm that this shipping box was lost. All right, here we go. Send our move. Okay, that's it. One last turn. Our last turn before we say goodbye to Bockerly. I know it's getting a bit silly. We have yet to put in a lead that the game didn't have a solution for. We're going to talk about that. It's clear that this case was designed a little bit differently than the other two. On our next episode, our final episode, we will fairly quickly submit our answer and then spend a little bit of time talking about it. So if you have thoughts on the game, please do try to join me for the next episode so we can talk about our thoughts on the game. I'll see you, if you're joining me for Dear Holmes, in about 5 minutes. So otherwise, next week.